Good morning. This is the Arlington County Board of Equalization hearing for June 17th, 2020. The first property that's on our docket is RPC 01-054-016, 2625 John Marshall Drive. Mr. Foley is here presenting for his property. You can begin, sir, and tell us in 8 minutes about your appeal. Is your microphone on? Okay, we've got some technical.
Do we have another appellant on as well?
Yes.
With two
But that's fine. That's fine for residential.
Okay.
I still can't hear you. In the meantime, I'm going to ask Mr. Makowski, if you could just turn your camera off so that the appraiser can appear up in the spot. You can still listen, but we don't need to see your face.
Okay.
Okay.
Can anyone hear me? This is Mr. Foley, by the way.
Okay, I can hear you. I've got everybody. I don't see George, but I guess he'll pop in. Okay, so Rosa, we'll reset the clock now that we've got, now we've got it.
Okay.
Okay, so Mr. Foley, you can start with your 8 minutes and tell us about the case.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. I haven't used this particular video conferencing. We're all using multiple conferencing systems. Okay, so we own 2625 John Marshall Drive. And as you can see from our appeal, it's a very simple issue that we're raising. So our lot is a very unique shaped lot. It is shaped like an isosceles triangle. It is an exterior lot with one of the long sides of the isosceles street side. So it's exterior and it has very low depth. Previously, when we had done a renovation on our home, we had applied for and obtained a variance. When you look on page 11 of the package that you guys provided, you can see that we had a bit of a front and rear variance, but that plat also shows that a very large percentage of our lot is unbuildable. And the reason it's unbuildable is because it's has very high street frontage with a 25-foot setback, and it's very uniquely shaped. Most of the square footage just doesn't have the depth to build on like comparable homes in the area. Some time ago, about a little over a year ago, we had reached out to the county about obtaining a variance for an in-law suite for my elderly parents. And it was confirmed that not only could we not build as is on our lot, but it would be very unlikely that we could obtain a variance because of the street setback requirements and the nature of the statutes that come into play. So my position is that, look, we are being taxed simply based on the square footage of our lot without taking into account the shape of our lot, which affects the value in this case. Now, the assessor for this hearing has provided several comps, I think 3 of them. And if you look at those comps, while they are corner lots, now our lot while it's not technically a corner lot, practically it is a corner lot. When you look at that plat, you can see where it's situated. But these corner lots, as you can see, are basically a triangle and a couple of rectangles that are rounded off on an end at where the corner is, and that means they have a lot of depth. And the bottom line is if someone were to buy our house and look at the potential to develop it, our lot is significantly less developable than just about any lot you can look at, but certainly the ones that are provided for these comps. And our position is that it's not fair that, on the one hand, the zoning ordinances will not permit us to obtain a variance to build additionally, as most people could do without a variance. I'd say probably 90%. But at the same time, we're being taxed at the same rate simply based on the square footage of our lot. It's not a fair way to assess us for a tax. It's not equitable. And, I'm not an expert in property law, but when I've looked around in other jurisdictions, often what is taken into consideration is the depth of the lot and the frontage when it comes to development, because that affects the value of the land. And I think when one simply takes a look at the picture of our land, I think it's immediately apparent, well, this is an unusually shaped lot. And when one sees that when our architect had applied for the variance, he noted that we actually, our house as was before we even had the initial variance, was grandfathered in because it had a rear setback that was too close to a property line. So we have a very unusual lot. We have a very unique situation. The comps that have been provided do not nearly address the unique situation that our lot presents. And our position is that the methodology used to assess our tax is not fair in our particular case. That's all I got for now. Any questions or anything?
No, we'll get to that. Okay, thank you. I just wanted, before we hear from the county, to note Mr. Lawson has a conflict on this case and will not be talking or voting on this case. So, okay, we can go ahead and hear from our appraiser.
I'm okay on this case.
Oh, I thought you said the first case.
No, it's case number 1. Not the first case, but the one that has
Okay.
number
All
1
right.
assigned to
I take
it.
that back then. Okay. He's got a conflict on the third case. All righty. We'll hear from the county now.
Yes, hello, good morning. My name is Jorge Yavar. I'm representing Arlington County Department of Real Estate Assessments. Property address 2625 John Marshall Drive. Currently assessed at $898,000 for 2020. The property is located in neighborhood 501004. The base value for the land of a buildable lot is $700,000. That corresponds to an average size lot of 7,580 square feet. We have determined that that's the point of balance that actually shows that they support a home site, about 7,580 square feet. The property that we're looking today is actually much larger than that. It's 11,286 square feet, which is significantly much larger. Yeah, based on that, is value accordingly using the current land valuation method. I hear Mr. Foley's concern about the way we value properties in Arlington and in this neighborhood, and I understand that our current valuation method actually is addressing the issue of being a larger lot that is already much larger than the average. So I'm presenting 3 other properties as a comp that shows that the way we are valuing is related to the size of the lot. So if you see the comp sheet that shows the valuation that I'm presenting, you see that all the properties are being valued around $700,000. The lots that are smaller actually are being valued lower, and the lots that are bigger are being valued slightly higher. We don't have any particular adjustment for different size or different shapes of the lots. We don't have any particular methodology that address that issue of the shape of the lot. We basically use the actual square footage to calculate the value of the lot. And I think, we believe that the current valuation already is addressing those issues for lots that are larger than the average. My recommendation to the board is to confirm the current valuation at $737,100, based on that the concern of the appellant is already being taken into consideration into our valuation. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. All right, questions from board members? Mr. Matzkin.
It's for the department. I noticed that the land value went up over 10% for the appellant's property. Is that what happened throughout the neighborhood? 10+% increase this year?
The increase in the neighborhood yes, last year the land value was 665,000, and this year went up to 700,000, and all of this is supported by recent sales in the neighborhood.
By sales, yeah.
And that is close to, it's approximately 5% increase in the land value. Mr. Foley actually have seen 6.2%, which is almost very close to the average.
Other questions?
It's 10.5%.
Mr. Hoffman.
Yeah, I was just looking at the map, and that it's not exactly the same. Obviously, going to be hard to find a lot the same size and shape, but right on the other corner, RPC 010-54003 on Nottingham and 27th. It's kind of a similar. I think the frontage is on 27th Street, and it's kind of a not very deep, but a wide lot. I was just curious if you had the land value on hand for that, if that was similar.
Yes, actually, there is a map of green that shows all the land values, and most of the properties on this neighborhood are around the $700,000 mark. That will be the point of balance for a buildable lot, $700,000. Some of them are smaller, some of them are larger, but most of them, the land valuation is $700,000 or around that number. Most of the lot, yeah.
Yeah, I'm seeing 706, but I mean, I can't measure it exactly here, but it looks like similar size. What's the difference between the 737 value and the 706? Is it based on the total square footage?
Well, the difference between the subject, I mean, the land value for the subject is 737,100, and the base value is 700,000. So the difference is $37,000 for a lot that is at least 40% larger than the average. So we already.
Sorry to interrupt. What property are you asking about specifically?
I'm asking about the one on the corner of Nottingham and 27th. It just looks like about the same size.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
706.
Yeah.
But this lot is smaller. This lot is smaller than.
Can you give them the square footage for that one, Jorge?
Yes.
In comparison to the subject?
I think I look at that one. It's close to 9,000 square feet, if I'm correct.
Okay, so it's like 2,000 smaller than the subject property.
Yes.
Okay.
If you see yeah.
But it's 2,000 smaller, but it's buildable.
Right.
As opposed to the subject that it's not buildable, correct?
Oh, well, this property has been improved and has access to utilities since 1954. I mean, the house was built in 1954, so this property is improved. A house has been there since 1954. It's buildable. I mean, the excess land, the additional square footage is already being valued at a lower rate. It's only $10 per additional square foot above the average lot size. And I think our method is already addressing the concern of the appellant. he's receiving a much lower per square foot rate compared to smaller lots. You can see the lot that is right next to him, 01054-015. It's at least half of the size of his lot, and he's paying $685,800 for the land only. So you can see the difference between the two lots, same depth, much smaller, similar restrictions to increase the footprint of the house, and the valuation is not that different. In my opinion, the method that we're using to value this property is accurate. It's supported by the recent sales, and I think supports a fair market value.
Okay, let me ask you on the property adjacent, the 01054015 that you're talking about, what's the square footage of that lot?
Yes, that's much smaller. See, 010.
It's like 6,000.
Yes, roughly 6,000. Roughly 6,000, and the subject is 11,000.
Right, okay. All right, other questions from board members? Mr. Hoffman.
Yeah, I had one for the appellant about that variance request, because there's a plan in the package that we received that shows that something was approved. I guess that was the original home, and then there's a stamped plan with a proposed addition and a carport. Is that the in-law suite that you were talking about? And was that rejected formally, or is that kind of still in the process right now?
No, so that's an old, that's what was approved some years ago. The carport, and it was like a family room. So that's existing, and it was, we obtained a variance when we applied for it. And if you look on, and that's on page 11, I believe what you're looking at.
Yeah.
And if you see that there's a dotted line triangle that's kind of drawn around and through the improvement, which is our house and the carport, and that shows you the buildable area without a variance for improvements. And as you can see, so it's more or less a triangle within the triangle that our lot is. And when you look at that, you can see that we have a very tiny triangle left that we can build on. We've been informed that we cannot build on top of the carport or the addition, which is the family room. Basically, the original footprint of the house can be built up. So I think when one focuses and one says, well, this is a much larger lot, for example, than the adjacent, so forth on, our issue is not, it's not the size of the lot, it's the shape of the lot, because that materially affects our ability to improve the lot, and it affects the value of the lot moving forward. The house next to us has depth that they can build back into without a variance. We can't. We already had to get a variance and grandfathered on the original house itself for it to be the case, because again of the unusual shape of the lot. It's really the shape that we're talking about, in addition to the fact that it's not an interior lot, it's an exterior lot with a very high street frontage, and then again the low depth. And we've been told that we're almost have an almost zero chance of getting any kind of variance because of existing variance laws.
Okay. All right, other questions? Mr. Lawson.
I think you got some really bad advice from the zoning office. But let me ask you, have you looked into the new rules on accessory dwelling units?
Well, we had, and actually I believe that's what we had inquired about. When I'd come across that, we'd reached out by email to inquire about it. This is a little over a year ago or so, and that's when we had a little back and forth on the email. And I think I referenced that. It's in your package, the individual that I spoke with, who seemed to be pretty high up in the agency and had consulted with other people in the agency, the zoning department, about that via an email link. Because, and again, it's a 25-foot setback. It's the street frontage of our lot requires that, and apparently there's no ability to get a variance on that with existing laws.
I don't think that's accurate.
Okay, other questions before we go to wrap up? No? Okay, Jorge, if you take a minute to wrap up and give us any final comments.
Yes. So based on the current land method that we're using in Arlington County, we determined that the land value for this property should be $737,100. That should be considered or be fair and equitable, and should be confirmed for 2020. So again, the evaluation should be $737,100. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Foley, if you take a minute to wrap up, please.
Thank you very much for hearing our appeal today. Again, I'm going to reiterate that the model that's used by the county to assess the value of our land doesn't take into consideration the shape of our land. It doesn't take into consideration the low depth and the high street frontage, and the fact that it is not buildable like comparably shaped lots of similar or the same square footage. In essence, our square footage is being taxed for our land at the same rate as those who can build a significant amount of improvement on our land, and that's not equitable and it's not fair. And we're requesting that a formula be used that takes into account the lack of buildability of our lot. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. Okay, it's just among board members, so all other microphones are off. So what does everybody think? Go ahead. Mr. Lawson.
In the zoning office, he's the one who handles, I'm sorry?
Yeah, you were cutting in and out in the beginning. I couldn't hear you.
Oh, I apologize.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
I think you should see Mr. Reese in the zoning office. I do think that this is exactly why BZA exists, is for awkward situations like this. And so the difference between this lot and some of the other lots that were pointed to is nothing can be done by right. And so I think the value of this lot should be decreased by what it would take to go through a BZA action in order to get relief from these onerous setbacks. But it could be that an accessory dwelling unit might be able to be done by right. I'm not sure because of I'm not sure what the setbacks are with respect to the new ADU requirements. I'd have to look at it and have it looked at by Mr. Reese. But I do think it would take about $5,000 to go through the process. And so I think the value of the lot should go down probably by approximately $5,000.
Okay, other comments? Mr. Matzkin.
I have a question for us. Isn't it long established department policy to not value land based on its buildability? They, of course, have a diminished value on the excess size, but they, as a routine standard, and it's reflected here, but not on buildability. It is what it is, and that's what BZA is for. Am I not correct on that, you all?
Well, I would say that, I mean, they look at the utility. I mean, we've seen lots of other cases where you've got a very large lot, but it slopes down in the back and you can't build on it. And there are adjustments there to the assessments, for the lack of utility to the property. So I would say yes and no to your question. And I think that's kind of part of why we're here. Mr. Lawson, you had something, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say that if you're going to up the value based on extra square footage, it's got to be usable. And this is not usable without getting a governmental permission, which is discretionary. I mean, there's no guarantee the BZA would grant relief. I think they would, but there's no guarantee.
Right. When I first looked at this, I mean, I initially thought, yeah, I think it needs to come down just because of the lack of utility and the lack of ability to use the property. I'm troubled with the property right next door that is, 6,000 square feet and it's assessed at 685. And I don't know how much of the house takes up the original 11,000, but these are not comparable. I mean, you can't build out, you can't do anything else with it. And just by looking at it, the shape of the lot and the road frontage, you know that it's got setbacks all the way from that, and then it's got setbacks from the other property line. So I think this is overassessed. Other thoughts? Mr. Penaranda. Turn your mic on.
Sorry, yeah, I did.
That's right.
Answering Ken's questions, I don't think we have made any adjustments in the past based on the shape or, you know, the slope of the property, unless it was really detrimental to the property. You know, and we haven't really made any changes based on what it could be done with the property until there's actually an application or something that is in process. But based on, you know, speculating what could be done or what may be done in the future, I don't think there's any adjustments that we've made. And the property that Greg was asking about in the corner, I looked it up, and that actually has 8,180 square feet. So, in my opinion, they are all assessed, you know, equally, I guess, in the neighborhood, based on the base land value and the additions to the, you know, larger lots. So I'm not really inclined to make any changes.
Jose, can I just ask you, so on that one that you said that's 8,000 square feet, but it's buildable square feet, correct? I mean,
Well,
and isn't that assessed at 706? Is that am I looking at the right parcel?
Yeah, 706.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, all the lots are buildable. All the lots have, you know, what it takes. It's a lot plus whatever you can build on it. Again, you know, if we're going to make any changes, it should be based on what someone applies to do or what it can get.
Right, but in this case, Mr. Foley has applied and been told, no, he can't do it.
He has not applied.
Excuse me?
He did not apply. He asked if what they thought.
Right, there was never any application to make any, you know, improvements or additions to the house except to, you know, to do the variance, which was approved, you know.
If he was denied, I would agree that there's an issue here of that level. But at this point, it's not a tear-down house. It's a unique situation because he wants to simply add more room for his existing. And that's a restriction. But I think if he went through BZA and they said, no, it's not going to happen, then I think it comes back to us and we say the value's not there.
But Mark,
go ahead.
You have the cost of going through the process, which is a minimum of $5,000.
Well, in a teardown, you buy a teardown for the full price, and then you got the cost of teardowns and all the other kinds of permittings. I mean, so you're not discounting values based on those kind of things either. You know, that's the price of doing business, and price of his new addition if that's what he'd like to get.
I would agree with you, but they've upped his assessment based on extra area that's unusable without permission.
Without permission.
And a cost to get the permission.
Exactly.
Well, there's still use. I mean, there's use and enjoyment of that property, which is his.
It's a very nice property.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, just like every neighbor, every lot has a yard that doesn't have a building on it.
Mm-hmm.
So there's use and enjoyment there. There's some value to that. I think the department put a good exhibit together showing that the per square foot, he's kind of in the lowest 30% of the per square foot charge at $65 a square foot versus being in the highest. You know, I think it would be very unfair if the full lot size was using the $90 rate.
Right.
So that's kind of, I mean, that's pushing me to think there's not a huge adjustment to be made here. I kind of like Barnes's approach, which is to give some acknowledgement to the lot size and the difficulties that he would have to get anything done there. I think that's a fair estimate of what it takes to get through BZA on the low end.
Okay, just one final comment on that. I mean, Barnes, you're saying it's $5,000, you know, to apply, but reducing it by $5,000 doesn't equate to $5,000.
Well, the 5,000 was an estimate of the engineering fees and architectural fees, plus the application is hundreds. It's not that much.
Okay. All right, any other question or comments?
Again, I would agree with making a reduction if this was a lot that was, in particularly, you know, only this lot was not properly assessed, but, you know, everything is being equally assessed, in my opinion, so I don't see any adjustments in this case.
All right. Would somebody like to make a motion?
Well, I was full of motions yesterday, and so I'll go ahead and...
Wait. Well, hold on one second. Okay. I really wasn't. I think somebody else wants to make a motion. Mr. Lawson?
Yes, why don't I make a motion that we reduce the assessed value to $888,000.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Lawson. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we got Mr. Hoffman, a second. Okay, the motion's on the table to reduce the assessment to $888,000. All in favor?
Aye.
So we've got Mary and Mary on there. Mark, you're not on?
I'm not on.
Okay, and so opposed?
Aye.
So we have Ken, Jose, and Mark. Okay, the motion carries 4-3. The assessment's been reduced to $888,000.
And that reduction was on the land, right, Barnes?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you for your time. Can I just clarify that? So the land is valued at $736,100 about. So is that reduction is going to specifically come off the land then?
Yes, I see the land at 737.1.
Okay, right. I'm looking.
Where are you?
Yeah, so he took 10,000 off of it, so it would be 727.1. The building stays the same.
Okay, thank you very much for your time today, everybody. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Have a good day.
All righty. Okay, moving along to the second case. Do we have the appellants?
Yeah, she's here.
Okay, all right. Okay, so this case on the agenda, I don't know if I hear an echo. It's 4001047, 124 South Barton Street. And I don't see the appellant, but you say that he or she is there, so you may start your 8 minutes to tell us about the property.
Hi, my name is Toshiya Akiyama. Can everyone hear me?
Uh-huh.
Great, thank you. I own with my wife a property at 124 South Barton Street. Thank you very much for this opportunity to speak. An appeal of a tax assessment on a property based on two alternatives. Either the appellant makes the appeal on the basis that the property is assessed at more than its fair market value, or the appellant makes the appeal on the basis that the property is not assessed equitably with similar properties. This appeal is made based on the latter alternative, that the property is not assessed equitably with similar properties for 2020. The department has assessed the value at $803,000, which we believe is an inequitable assessment as compared to comparable properties. Compared to a group of comparable properties in my neighborhood and in surrounding neighborhoods that were sold last year, my property had in 2019 an assessed and proven value that was higher than the average of these comparable houses, and in 2020 became even higher than that with the department's increased assessment. With the 2020 assessment, my property's improvement value is now higher than these comparable houses by 50%, an increase from a 40% differential in 2019. There was no improvement to my property during this time period beyond some cosmetic changes that we feel can justify this unequitable increase as compared to the comparable properties. Based on the information we received as part of this appeal, the Department of Real Estate evaluated the property as part of our purchase of the property in 2019. The department updated, based on this information that we received, the department updated my property's record to account for updates and improvements that were found during this evaluation by the department. It is my understanding that the last time the department conducted an evaluation was in 2013. While this might be the case, the department did during this time period increase the assessed value of the property. In fact, the department increased it by a greater amount than it did the comparable houses. Between 2014 and 2019, the improvement value of our property increased by 28%, a much higher rate of increase than the average 12% increase assessed to the comparable houses during the same time period. Even if there is evidence that my property is of a higher quality or grade than some of the comparable properties, this should have been reflected in the higher improvement value assessed over the past 5 years to 2019. As I said before, the improvement value of my property in 2019 was 40% higher. To further increase in 2020, the assessed value of my property such that its assessed value is even greater than the comparable properties is not justifiable, given that there were no improvements to the house since 2019 beyond some cosmetic changes. The Department of Real Estate cites one of the comparable properties with RPC number 24-001-050 as having had its assessed value increased in March 2020. But the situation with this property is different from our property. The other property underwent last year a major renovation. The department increased the assessed value to reflect improvements resulting from this renovation. Our property did not, as I said before, did not go under any renovation last year. Therefore, such an increase was not justified for our house. If the department's reason to oppose the proposed increase was to reflect changes in market conditions during the past year, then such increase should be imposed on all comparable properties. Many of the properties, especially the ones on my street, had no increase on the improvement value. Of course, my property is not the only one in our market. This was not done. As I said, a lot of properties had no increase. So to impose the increase only on my property, I feel is not equitable. In conclusion, we feel the department is not assessing in 2020 our property equitably. In 2019, the assessed value was already higher than comparable properties. If the department were to impose this proposed increase such that our property's assessed value was even higher than comparable properties, despite no improvements, then our property would not be treated equitably with comparable properties. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, sir. Okay, Ms. Churchill, if you would tell us from the county's perspective.
Yes, ma'am. So good morning. My name is Nicole Churchill. I'm a residential appraiser with the Department of Real Estate Assessments. An exterior inspection of the home and the surrounding comparables was performed, but an interior inspection of the home was denied by the homeowner. This property is a 1 3/4 story vinyl siding home. It has 3 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms, a finished basement, a year built of 1944, and an effective age of 2010. The quality is very good minus. The appellant feels that the increase to this property is unjustified due to the surrounding properties not experiencing the same increase. The comparables that the appellant did submit, 4 of the 5 have lower quality, lower effective age, lesser square feet, and these differences account for assessment values not being the same. The comparable properties provided did not increase the same as the subject due to the subject having errors and adjustments needed to be made to the record. The one similar property of the comparables provided, 24-150, which is 112 South Barton Street, the one that the appellant just mentioned, did have a recent renovation and a recent sale, and a supplement was mailed for March 2020 and is now very similar to the subject. The subject property did recently sell in April of 2019 and was inspected in May 2019. At the time, adjustments were made to the effective age, quality, interior finished square feet, and exterior features. These adjustments were made due to the updates and renovations that were not previously accounted for in the assessment. The average total increase to the neighborhood was 8%. The subject did see a 20% increase overall due to these corrections to the record. The current value of the property, even with a 20% increase, is still $17,000 less than the purchase price of $820,500. After reviewing the submitted information and assessment and sales of comparable properties, it was determined that the assessment was fair and equitable and should not be changed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, members of the board, any questions? No questions? No? Mr. Lawson? No questions? All right. Ms. Churchill, is there anything else that you need to tell us in a final wrap-up?
I would just like to reiterate the fact that these were corrections that were made to the record, so items that were not there in the previous assessment, and the fact that we are still, roughly $17,000 less than the purchase price in April of 2019. So I do ask that you confirm the current assessment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Akiyama, if you have anything else you want to tell us in a minute to wrap up, please.
Sure, thank you. Might be the case that updates to the record in the department's office to the property would have been needed in 2019 because, as I said in my opening remarks, I think the last time that it was been some years since the property was last evaluated. But nevertheless, regardless of that, it is evident that the assessed value, the actual dollar value, did increase during this time period, irrespective of what kind of evaluation or updates to the record was done. So it wasn't as if there was no increases to the assessed value during this 5-year period. There was, and in fact, the increases was at a higher rate than the comparable properties.
Okay. Thank you, sir. All right. It's just now among the board members. What does everybody think?
Well, let me tell you, I should have asked how much the extra assessment was on 112 Barton Street, but I think, looking at both properties, I think the improvements were similar. So, and this is not a particular type of increase that the property has, or it's not something unusual. I think we've seen this before. When a property is improved and then it's sold, the county is going to make adjustments. And as soon as the sale happens, unfortunately, that will go into the record. Even if no permits were obtained or approved. A lot of times we've seen that the county makes adjustments based on what's listed, what's advertised, or what it shows. And the pictures actually do show that the property was very nicely improved. And if the county didn't have the correct record last year, then, it comes a time when it has to be done. So I really don't see how we can undo that or lower it just based on something that we may feel is not, or it's too high or something.
Okay. Other comments? Mr. Hoffman?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't really hear that there was any objection to the fair market value of the property. I think it was just on the basis of equalization, he probably was feeling that his neighbors should be paying more tax. Just looking at the surrounding properties and hearing the department's review, it sounds like the level of build there's a string of houses that are all very similar original construction, and some of them have been renovated, some have popped the top and put in an extra room upstairs, and then some are closer to the original. So I think there's a big difference in the houses on that block that's being accounted for in the more or less $200,000 swing in assessments. So I'm with Jose. I don't really see anything from a fair market value standpoint that we can make an adjustment. And from an equalization standpoint, I think the county's made the case that there's different build qualities on this block and in this neighborhood that have to be accounted for.
The effective age on this house is also about 15 years or greater than most of the comps. It's got the upgrades in it that the others don't.
Right, and it's been underassessed.
Yeah.
For years, so. Okay, any other comments, or would somebody like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion
to
confirm the county's assessment at 803,100.
All right, I'll second.
Okay, I'll second.
Okay, we have Greg and Mary Dooley seconding. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Ken, I didn't see you. Are you in? Ken?
You might have dropped
muted.
Mr. Matzkin?
Ken, you're muted.
Unmute your phone. Can you shake your head if you agree with the motion? Okay, then it's unanimous. The county's original assessment is confirmed at the $803,100. Thank you, sir. Okay, do we have Ms. Moore on?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, she is here.
Okay, so just before we start this, now I want to go on record that Mr. Lawson has a conflict with this case, correct? Mr. Lawson? Okay. Okay, so the next case that we're looking at, which will just be the 6 board members asking questions and voting, is RPC 3103084 3810 Kemper Road. And Ms. Moore, you can start with your 8 minutes and tell us about the property. I don't see Ms. Moore.
She's there, but I don't know if she's having difficulties.
Okay.
Hello?
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
This is Mr. Moore. It's not Miss Moore.
Okay, I guess I can't see you, and I'm sorry, Mr. Moore. And what's your first name, sir?
Ezra.
Ezra, okay. Okay. Thank you. You can start with your 8 minutes.
Well, first, let me thank you all for giving me the opportunity to provide my thoughts on this matter for the tax increase for 3810. I'll start with last year when we had the appraiser came out and asked us about assessing our property higher, and I gave him comps to consider, and what he said, can you still hear me?
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
Oh, okay, and what he said was some of those comps look like they were transfer ownership between family members, so they couldn't consider those comps. And another comp it's not quite like yours. So based on the conversation, I didn't appeal last year because they said my comps I would use would not be credible. This year, in 2019, we had our property appraised. Well, it wasn't by our doing for a residential appraisal. It was basically for a commercial lending appraisal with a very reputable company that's highly regarded in the area, whose owner has actually been on the appellate boards in Fairfax County for several years. So we looked at it, and I think he had a very good, strong appraisal to look at our property. So when we looked at it, he came up with 4 different comps, and he came up with the number 380, and I was shocked that it was much lower than what the county originally projected our value to be at. He gave up 4 comps to review, and through the hearing, the writing that I got, one of the comps were disallowed, saying it was not close by, if I remember reading correctly, and all the 4 comparables are within a mile of my property, so I'm not sure that one was discredited. But there's 2 on Monroe Street, and the one looks like the one on Monroe Street had a higher value, was used, and the one on Monroe Street with the lower value was disregarded. So I wanted that one to be considered in the evaluation as well, as far as comps for surrounding properties. Secondly, I also looked at the square footage of the basement area of my home, and as far as finished area. And when I read that it was like over 400 square feet of finished area, it just drew a red flag in my mind, because I lived there several years, and it's really a very small basement area. And when I did actual measurements for that property, the square footage is 319.33 square feet, and I think not the 407 finished area that was recommended. And if I include the utility area, that would only add another 30.66 square feet of square space to it, but I believe that is not included in the evaluation. So the max square feet with the utility room area is 350 square feet, and not the 407 finished area that I've received in the comps. And those are, and like I said, the appraisals that the properties the county recommended that would be compared with were properties that were required and really upgraded with major improvements to them, from granite to central air. And I don't have any of those things in my property. And some other comps that were lower that my appraiser found out also didn't have those items. But today I went to a realtor to verify what I had sold it for, and they recommended at the most you can start it at $375. And you might get a price war or something like that, but she wouldn't recommend anything higher than $374 start price for that property. Those are my concern areas that I found out my review of the property.
Okay, thank you, sir. Ms. Churchill?
Yes. I'm sorry, 1 second. Okay. Thank you again. My name is Nicole Churchill, and I am a residential appraiser with the Department of Real Estate Assessments. An interior and exterior inspection was completed on February 2nd, 2020 with fellow appraiser Tressa. This property is a 2-story brick veneer side-by-side home with a finished basement, a year built of 1945, and effective age of 1972. The quality being average plus. The appellant feels that the increase is unfair due to the market and submitted a private fee appraisal. The fee appraisal from 8/29/2019 stated a recommended value of $380,000 based on the comparable properties listed. 3 of these 4 properties listed are within the neighborhood, and during the analysis period, the 4th comparable was not within the subject neighborhood. The 3rd comparable within the fee appraisal is also provided as the county's 3rd comparable. The fee appraisal makes a deduction of $42,000 in adjustments for upgrades, conditions, central air, and for upgrades, condition, and central air conditioning. The county assesses comparable at $430,300, which recognizes the upgrades, and feel that the sale price of $434,000 supports the subject's current assessment. The subject, when inspected, changes were made to the square footage of the basement due to the fact that the fellow appraiser and I measured the interior of the basement. The sketch was updated, the bed and bath location, and we lowered the quality from average plus to average. The total value was reduced from 411,700 to 403,000. As a result of the review, the inspection, and information submitted, we determined the assessment be corrected, therefore causing the decrease in value, and can be confirmed at 403,000. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Questions from board members? Mr. Metzgen.
I have two for the department. First one's a real easy one. On comparable two, grayed out, it shows a lesser land value. And my second question is going to be about land value as well. Is that because it's on 4 Mile Run Drive, or is it just on, it's much lower than, for instance, comparable one? Why is that off?
Let me double check the square footage. It is a 4 Mile Run. It is an adjustment due to it being on 4 Mile Run.
That's surprising. Okay, and my second question should a little tougher, so that's why I made it second and not first. The real increase in the appellant's assessment, of course, is in land, especially now that you've reduced the improvement of value even more than you had originally. And is that purely reflected in sales in his neighborhood with similar, and everybody's gone up that significant percentage?
Right. So the increase to land for that neighborhood went from, it depended on, there were two different land values in that neighborhood, but either 345 to 385 or 265 to 305. So the property itself, hold on one second, I'm sorry. But yes, the whole neighborhood saw a significant increase. That neighborhood in the south side was seeing a lot of sales for this past year. So there was a lot of information to work with, and it did go, it was a 310,000. Yeah. So that's how much, sorry, not 305, it went up to 310,000.
Thank you.
But it was the whole neighborhood, not just his property.
Okay, other questions? No, okay, Mr. Hoffman. Mr. Hoffman, can you turn your microphone on?
Looking at the other unit in the same structure, being that this is a duplex, it should probably have similar land values and everything. That seems to be significantly higher on the assessment. It's like 425. It would be 3808 Kemper Road.
Hold on one second. So I was trying to pull it up in my ProVal. I am having a technical difficulty in regards to pulling that up.
There it is, right there. 3310-30083.
33.
The difference is on the improvements, not the land.
Yeah. So I mean, is it an updated? They've got renovation, central air. I mean, I want to make sure that we're equitable with the other unit.
Can you give me that parcel number one more time? I'm sorry.
Yeah, RPC 310-300-83.
Okay, so it does look like this one has a higher effective age, and it does have the central air and slightly lower finished square footage, but in the basement. But it is close to the subject property with the total finished square feet. So I think the effective age is where the increase is there, because the land value is the same as well.
Okay, thanks.
So I really think on that one specifically, it was just the effective age is higher than the subject properties.
Okay.
Any other questions from board members? No?
No.
Okay, Ms. Churchill, if you take a minute to wrap up, please.
Okay. I would just like to bring up that the private fee appraisal is making adjustments for upgrades, conditions, central air conditioning. But we believe that due to the inspection and the changes that were made from doing the inspection, that the decrease in value from 411,700 to 411,700 to 403,000, we recommend that be confirmed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Moore, if you take a minute to wrap up and tell us any final comments?
Yes, thank you. When I look at some of the comparables on Kemper Road, I wanted to reiterate that Monroe Street is at the top of Kemper Road Street where it crosses, and it should be considered. It's within a mile. It's in our neighborhood. You know, most appraisals that they look for sales and comparable. They will go on. So let's keep that in mind. We're talking less than a mile square footage. And when I look at some of these older homes that haven't been renovated and just passed on, their property values are, you know, much lower or in line with my with the appraisal that we got. And again, this was a commercial appraisal, not for me to have my personal residential use or personal funds for myself. And it was being used to back by a commercial business, a commercial banker, a reputable one in Main Street. So I wanted to make sure that everybody realizes it's not for a particularly residential appraisal that I went and bought just to sort of satisfy my case here, just to support the business and all. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. All righty. It's just among the board members now for comments.
Well, I think I'll start. I think the county did. I mean, the change that was made, I think, was appropriate. Because when you drive, you know, through Kemper Street, Oxford, and that neighborhood, you can tell which home has been renovated, which one needs to be renovated, or you know, needs improvement. So I think the change of the quality was appropriate, and I think the value is there. I've seen that neighborhood sales go, you know, up and down based on the condition of the property. And, you know, if the appellant was suggested a price of $375, yeah, I can guarantee you he's going to have a war of buyers coming through because the price is there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, the value is there. So I'm okay with the assessment the way it was suggested.
Yes, I agree. I mean, I'm even looking at the appraisal that was done for lending purposes, which is, you know, different than assessing it for tax purposes. But if you look at, I think the major difference on it, on page 3, under the cost approach, the appraiser's only valuing the land at $275. So that's another reason why, you know, it's much lower. I mean, if you look at his cost of $105 for the house, if you add that to the $310, which is certainly equalized in the neighborhood, that actually puts the value up to $415, which is higher than the assessment. So, you know, I think a lot of the issue with the appraisal that was done for lending is that the land value is too low in it. So I think what the county did for the adjustment is appropriate. And, you know, I don't see a cause to lower it anymore myself.
Well, I do feel for the individual that 2017, his taxes have gone, or his valuation has gone up $90,000. And that's a lot. And it is, you know, but I don't see any reason for adjustment either. That the appraiser came in with a low land value, as you said, and the comps, I think, are showing it. It's a house that needs work. But that's the market.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Any other comments? No?
Yeah, I was going to point out that I thought the independent or rather the commercial appraisal was seemed to be pretty good until Mary. I see your point. I didn't recognize the land value that they're kind of out of whack with the rest of the land values in the neighborhood, and that's difficult to argue at this point. So you know, I was leaning towards a further reduction, but I think I could probably get on with the 403 reduced number that the department has put forth.
Okay. Anybody else? No? Okay, would somebody like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Go ahead, Mary.
Okay, I'll make a motion to confirm the county's revised assessment of 403,000.
Okay.
I'll second that.
Okay.
All right.
Got a motion, a second from Mr. Metzgen. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, it's 6-0 with Mr. Lawson not voting. So it is unanimous. The county has been confirmed to the revised assessment at 403,000.
All right. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, it's 10:07. How do people feel about taking a break? Not taking a break? Moving on?
You can go 5 minutes.
Take a 5-minute? Okay, so we will be back at about 10:12.
Okay.
Ready? The RPC is 21027-003, 5424 4th Street South. Mr. Machowski, you can go ahead and tell us about your case, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for everyone's time today. I'll keep it relatively brief. I did, and by way of background, I head up investments in capital markets over at Monday Properties. We own about 5 million square feet of office, retail, and multifamily in the area. So reviewing assessments is not foreign to me. What I did is I took effectively what I viewed as the comparable homes in my area, because my block obviously does back into Bluemont National Park. So I took from South Illinois Street, and I did from 3rd to 5th Street, all of the homes from South Illinois to the park in between those streets. And I looked at the average assessments of all of those homes. Now, if you look at the percent increase over the last 2 years of all of those homes, mine has gone up by 10.08% over the last 2 years. There are 3 other homes that are slightly higher. The north end of the range is 11.65%. All of these homes are on 4th Street. I don't know if anyone's been to my neighborhood, but I would argue that 4th Street is the least appealing street in Glen Carlin, between 3rd and 5th and 2nd and 1st. So nonetheless, what the average increase amongst all these homes, though, over the last 2 years was 6.95%. If you then go to fair market value of the home, I purchased the home for $619,000 4 years ago. Today, fair market value is approximately $700,000. That's an increase of 3.27% annually, which again is a normalized general inflation rate. So I'm just struggling to understand. And if you look at the appraisal for 2020, my improvement value actually went down. So the majority, actually all of the increase this year was based on the land. So I'm just struggling to understand why my home, which if I look at the other homes that are being appraised in my neighborhood, there are several that are much larger, much nicer than mine. I'm on a single-story, 1,200 square foot on slab home here. Why mine is being singled out? Further, my experience with my appraiser thus far, Mr. King, I believe it is, has been less than favorable and pleasurable, quite frankly. I've found his conduct to be slightly unprofessional when he visited my home, which I've denied him subsequent visits. He brought another gentleman. They were what I would call intrusive, quite frankly. The other gentleman went so far as to open one of the drawers in my built-in closet, which I found to be egregious. And I've had nothing but bad experiences. So I would ask that, one, to evaluate the appraisal here based on this methodology of comparing the comparable properties in my neighborhood. I would also ask that in the future I'm given a different appraiser. So I'll leave my comments at that because, candidly, that's my full argument.
Okay, thank you, sir. Mr. King?
Good morning, board. My name is Andrew King. I'll be representing the county in this case. The owner denied the inspection for 2020, but the property was inspected back in 2018, so we feel fairly confident in our records information. The property was totally renovated back in 2007, so that's reflected in the county's record. So no changes were made to the county's record on the property since 2018. And for 2020, all the same neighborhood changes were applied to the subject property as were applied to the other properties in the neighborhood, so land and improvement changes that were made. The county also values each property annually, so there's no weight put on previous year's valuation or neighborhood changes. We look at every sales analysis every year and apply those changes to each property every year. The property is still assessed below its 2016 sale price. And as I wrote in the write-up, you can see that the comparables that the appellant brought up, those properties were all visited in recent years to update the records for various renovations. We go out and visit every property that has a permit done. And when that permit's final, we update the records. So those are the reasons for those properties changing maybe differently than some of the other properties in the neighborhood. For all those reasons, the department believes the 2020 assessment is fair and equitable and proposes no change. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Questions from board members? Mr. Metzgen.
This again seems to be a land value issue. It seems that I don't do much residential real estate, but I work with people who do, that the northern part of South Arlington is, again, last couple of years, fairly hot. And we've seen it in some other appellants discussions today even, that the sales, this is a question for the department. It appears to me, and I want confirmation or rejection, it seems to me that the sales are hotter in this area and a lot of the increased value, assessed value is going to land. And that's what's reflected. So my question is that what's, if that's true, is that's what's being reflected in the appellant's increase? Because that's where all of it is, even if it's offset a bit by the improvement assessment. Is this a reasonably good neighborhood, and do you have lots of sales comps that defend your increased value, land evaluation? Thank you.
Sure. So there were a couple tear downs and new constructions in the neighborhood, so that gives us a good idea of what the land should be valued at. The other component of that, with the improvement falling, the appellant brought that up. What we try and always do is get about 100% for our cost to rebuild the property when we're running our software. So in this neighborhood, if you look at the right side of the worksheet, you can see that the LM for that neighborhood is 114. We're always trying to bring that closer to 100 to represent just 100% value of rebuilding the property. So any changes, we try and put more on the land to accurately reflect that cost to rebuild.
Okay, other questions? Mr. Hoffman.
Just to confirm from the appellant, your application says that the property is assessed at more than its fair market value. That's what you're disputing, right?
No, I'm disputing the escalation at which it's been escalated over the years. The fair market value and look, I understand that the assessed value is less than the purchase price, but that's the case for every property that I've ever looked at in Arlington County or in the region as I've evaluated investment opportunities. The appraised value is never the same as what the purchase price is. It's always approximately 90%.
Okay.
Okay, any further questions? No? Okay, Mr. King, if you take a minute to wrap up, please.
Sure. So no changes were made to the record this year. And in terms of equalization, the same changes were applied to the neighborhood as were applied to the subject property. And the subject property is, again, still below its 2016 sale price, giving a strong indication of fair market value. And so for those reasons, the county determined that 2020 assessment was fair and equitable. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Machowski, if you would take a minute to wrap up and tell us any final comments, please.
Sure. To be clear on the appraised value and sale value of my home, I closed on December of 2016, the middle of. So I would argue you could say that is 2017. So let's not overemphasize the time period here. And again, I just, in all of my years of doing commercial real estate and multifamily real estate, I've never seen assessments of properties that haven't had dramatic improvements go up year over year by approximately 5%. It's just egregious in my mind. So that's the end of my discussion.
Okay, thank you, sir. Okay, it's just among board members now. Where is everybody at on this? Mr. Metzgen.
Seems to me that it's all about the comps, and what I heard Mr. King say that and in this case, it's the comps of the land. And if we have tear down, scraped land going for increasing values, then everybody in the neighborhood's land is increased in value. So I mean, that's how equalization works at its heart. So I'm following a very direct chain of probabilities, of facts and conclusions.
Okay. Other comments?
I mean, I'll just
go ahead.
Go ahead, Barnes.
Mr. Lawson.
Yes, ma'am. I was just going to share that the lot value seems consistent with a lot of the sales that we've been seeing with our single-family house builders.
Okay, Mr. Hoffman?
Yeah, I'm just on the basis of the appeal, which is, at least the paperwork we have is a dispute of the fair market value. I think the fair market value is pretty well established by the department, and I think the appellant is confirming that they've not really got that off. It's more of an issue with the process, and the process is, in Virginia at least, is consistent and applied with Arlington County, where they assess at 100% of fair market value. I mean, that's the law. So whether the practice in other counties or in commercial or whatever is to go slightly below that in your experience, that's one thing. But the law is 100% fair market value.
Okay. Other comments?
I agree. I mean, overall, when we look at each assessment appeal, we look at and see whether the property is worth what each party is saying that it's worth. And I think in this case, the values, and because I drove through the whole neighborhood and through the whole block, and 4th Street, to me, it's not necessarily the worst street in that area, but it has smaller homes. But overall, I think the value is there, and it's equitable with the other properties that are similar. The increase may not be what some property owners want to see because the neighbor didn't get the right number the year before, but when adjustments are made, and this is the same as some of the other cases we've seen before, I'm okay with the value.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, I would agree. I think the sales support it, and I understand that the appellant doesn't like how it got to it, but it certainly is supported by the sales price, whether, it closed in, December of, 16 or 17, the value is there, so.
Folks,
Right.
none of
There's
these
no
homes
further,
are
it's
assessed at
just
their
among the board,
value.
sir.
And all of the tear downs
I'm sorry, excuse me.
are owner tear downs. These weren't developer tear downs. These were proposed.
Somebody mute him, please. Thank you. Okay. So that being said, I'll go ahead and move to confirm the county at the 6088. Do I have a second? Is that Mary?
Yes.
Okay, Mary Dooley, Mary Hogan, motion and a second to confirm the county. All in favor? Aye.
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 Barnes? Mr. Lawson?
That was aye.
Okay. Okay, and I assume no again, so it's unanimous 7-0. The county's confirmed at 6088. Thank you, Mr.
Poor form.
Okay. Is Mr. Hickson or Ms. Robinson in the queue?
No, I have not seen them.
Okay. I don't know if Sean is male or female. I assume it's male.
I haven't seen them either.
Okay, then we will move on the agenda to the fifth case then. That would be RPC 2303030, 3517 9th Street South. So if, Mr. King, if you'd like to tell us about the property, please. Can you unmute your phone, please, or your microphone?
Thank you. So the property was not inspected this year, but we did inspect it back in 2019. Looking at the appellant's comparables, I think a lot of them are smaller, older, or less recently renovated in the subject property, which was fully renovated back in 2013. As shown in the email exchange with the appellant, some of the information that the appellant is referencing for certain properties seems incorrect and maybe influencing their ideas of valuation. We inspected all of the sales that we used for the analysis. I personally inspected all of them, so we are very confident in the data and the size and information on those records compared to what perhaps a Redfin or a Zillow or some of these other commercial websites might have on their records. There was, however, a very strong sale in the 2020 analysis. You can see that in comparable number 1 on the comp sheet at 3918 8th Street South, which was nearby to the subject property. This was a renovated and expanded 1920s property, just the same as the subject property. This property's quality was very good minus, which indicated to us that the subject property should also be changed from very good to very good minus. So as a result of the review and the information submitted and this similar comparable property that we looked at, the department determined that a revision of the assessment from $948,000 to $922,400 was fair and equitable. Thank you.
Okay. Questions from any board members? Oh, very quiet today. Okay, Mr. King, do you have anything else to tell us?
Just as a result of the review, the property assessment was reduced to match the quality with a similarly updated older house in the sales period. Using the county information on other sales in the neighborhood, the county feels the reduction in assessment from $948,000 to $922,400 is fair and equitable. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Okay. It's just among the board members. Comments?
Well, I had a couple of questions for the appellant, but since they're not there, then there's not much to I guess, confirm or change based on what we have. So I'm okay with the assessment the way it was reduced.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. Anybody else? No? All right, then I will move to confirm the 2020 revised assessment of 922.4.
I'll second.
Okay, we got a motion and a second from Mary Hook. All in favor? Aye. It just froze. All in favor? Aye.
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 All right, anyone opposed? Okay, it's unanimous. It's been reduced to the county recommended amount of the 922.4. Okay, and last on the agenda is RPC 230-33025 at 4018 9th Street South. I assume that Mr. and Mrs. Norton is not here? I don't see them. Okay, so Mr. King, if you would go ahead and tell us about the property.
Thank you. This property was inspected in 2019 for a dormer addition, a rear dormer addition on the roof. The owner called in and we spoke about the issues with the property and the permit. So the upper level is unfinished currently. There's no heating, no drywall, it's not painted, things like that. So what I did is, while I added the dormer and the square footage to the base square footage of the record, we took out the finish on that upper level to set that at 0 to reflect that it's unfinished, it's unbuildable currently at the moment. We determine our issues with deferred maintenance. So the roof, the siding, the floors, these are all issues with the property as it ages that have been taken care of. We try not to take that into too much account when we're valuing properties. The appellant also brings up an issue of whether the property will be sold as a tear down. We can't value properties as tear downs. There's no way for us to take that into account when we're looking at the property. And additionally, most tear downs will already have an average truss quality or even a good quality, as some of the appellant's comparables show. The appellant also brings up a lot of sales that were foreclosures or short sales. So those aren't included in our analysis. We're looking at fair market value sales that are fair market value. Again, the unfinished nature of the second level was taken into account by removing the finished square footage from the total, as seen on the 1.75 floor line on the worksheet, which shows 0. This is the same process applied to homes with fixed stairs to unfinished attics or properties that have unfinished basements. It does go towards the base square footage, just because rebuilding that property would cost more money, but we acknowledge that it's not finished up there. And then it's important to remember also that the land alone went up 9% for the neighborhood. So that was $46,000 of the appellant's assessment for 2020. The improvement assessment also had to take into account the additional square footage from the bump out, even though there were some changes made to the quality and condition on the property. So taking into account the size of the lot, the size of the house, and applying a basic quality of average plus and an effective age of 1965, the department determined that the assessment was fair and equitable and did not make a change for 2020. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Questions? I'll just ask a question. Mr. King, on so I understand that you increased the square footage for the additional space. When historically assessed residential properties under construction, I mean, and I realize this is very slow progress of the construction on this property, and it appears to be quite a bit of exterior deferred maintenance and whatnot, but just for all the unfinished, is there any type, how do we adjust for that?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the beginning of the question again? It broke up a little.
Well, I mean, just that the nature of, you've increased it for this potential square footage that's going to be.
Right.
And then how do you come up with the amount that you adjust it for the work that's in progress?
So we put the upstairs as completely as 0. So if you look at the worksheet, that'll be page 8. If you go to the bottom 1.75 line, you can go across and see that the finished square footage is at 0. Even this is highly, unusual, because when a person is renovating their property, if they start renovating and tear something down in December, we don't go out on January 1, December 31st, and remove that to take into account what they're doing year to year. So even this in itself is, fairly unusual, but due to the multi-year nature, we're trying to take into account that this property may be unfinished upstairs for several years. So we removed that finished square footage in the cost software.
Okay, that's certainly more than fair. Okay, other questions? Mr. Matzke.
As for, of course, the department, I've got, in your presentation, I didn't hear the first, there was a couple of sentences that you got garbled, so you might have answered this. You're not including yet that additional square footage because it's not at all usable, but yet at the same time, you significantly increased from 2019 to this year the building value, the improvement value. If you're not including the construction, what are you including that makes this, relatively speaking, a huge increase?
So there's a couple different aspects here. So one is the dormer build out just adds raw square footage to rebuild the property. So even though it's unfinished, there's two components. There's base square footage and there's finished square footage. So the dormer blowout adds the base square footage. Just rebuilding those walls is going to cost more now than it did a year ago. The other component of that is we changed the quality from average to average plus, and the condition from fair to average. So as I show on the write-out, those are qualities and conditions that we reserve mainly for completely substandard properties, almost unlivable properties. We rarely use them. So what I was trying to capture was that the appellant lives in the house. So the finished square footage that is there is average quality. It's typical of what would be at a regular house. And then by putting the upper level at 0, we're acknowledging that there's no square footage up there. Now, the appellant writes that there's some issues with the interior of the home, but we were denied the interior inspection, and there were no photos provided of the interior except for the upper level. So, I mean, I think for us, we're just going to assume that it's an average livable house on the main level with an unfinished upper level.
Okay. Other questions? No?
One quick one. There was something in the package I couldn't find. I'm looking for it again about asbestos siding that was being removed or something. Is that part of the project? Has that been taken off the house at this point? Do you have any idea?
I think from the write-up, he said they just kind of fell off when they were working, putting the dormer on, maybe the crew. I mean, you can see in the photos, there's just a couple pieces missing. Okay. Again, that's an issue of maintenance. I mean, you can either replace them with faux asbestos if you want, or do whatever. I mean, it's just, we're not going to take too much of that into account on a property.
Mm-hmm. Okay, any other questions? No? Okay, Mr. King, if you have anything else you want to tell us in a minute to wrap up?
Sure. So while the upper level is currently unfinished, this is taken into account with the county's assessment on the property, taking into account the large base square footage that the permit added, the 55 years of depreciation currently on the property, and the base level of average plus and average condition. The county feels that the assessment of 683, 200 is fair and equitable. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, it's just among the board members.
Yeah, I originally had a question as far as the quality of the property, but or how the county actually makes the changes, but I think Mr. King clarified on that. So, and based on the fact that, you know, they can really see the interior to actually see what's there and what's not and what's usable or not, you know, I can't see how we can make any adjustments or changes.
Okay, Mr. Lawson, you were going to make a comment?
Yes, in the appellant's remarks, I read a sentence that says, however, I believe the intent of this evaluation is to have Arlington residents pay taxes on what they'd be able to sell their property for. I think that's exactly what it is we're trying to do. And I would call that a statement against interest, an admission against interest.
Yeah, I would agree with all the comments. I think it's difficult. I mean, just from what we saw, it does look like there's a lot of deferred maintenance, very slow progress of what he's trying to do. And that's a, you know, a personal decision to do that. It could be a financial decision, I don't know, but it seems to be longer than the usual, you know, but with no interior inspection or no photos even submitted of the rest of the house, I think it's very difficult to argue against the county. The other increase of the land is certainly supported by the properties around it. So I just don't think that the appellant made a case here for any type of reduction myself. Mr. Metzgen.
I'm just, because we've got a little time, I have a tough time almost doubling the value of the improvement given how little value the department has given to the increased size. It just, a percentage increase based on unfinished, continually unfinished work makes me uncomfortable. And if I vote against the status quo, it's only because that I find that unsettling.
Right, and I certainly share your concerns there, but again, the burden of proof is on the appellant, and the appellant hasn't provided anything to not support that. So, but that's fine, you get a vote, you know.
Well said, thank you.
So, okay, so any other discussion?
Yeah, I mean, just I found the picture of the asbestos that I was looking for, and you know, I'm familiar with this neighborhood, and you've got kind of maybe historically 1 out of every 8 houses has this siding on it, and everybody knows that it's a discount. If you were to sell the house, you know, you're either gonna, if somebody bought it in this condition, the first thing they're gonna do to try to market the house would be to rip the asbestos siding off and replace it, and that can be costly. So. You know, I'm kind of siding with Ken. This is a huge increase in improvement value, and with that in mind, you know, a reduction based on the condition of the siding, I would be supportive of. I don't know that I had the votes, but you know, something like that could be upwards of $25,000 to replace the asbestos and get this in some sort of marketable condition.
I'm with you and Ken. I think it's a little bit too steep of a jump for that. So I would. What are you proposing?
I would take the improvements value down by 25,000, just to account for the. This is kind of like one of the last houses in the neighborhood that still has that siding on it, and so from an equalization standpoint, I think that there's justification there. It's not a maintenance issue. It's just it's a condition of the actual, you know, structure of the property.
Right. I guess my only question there is if we reduce it, it's obviously just for this year. It's a $25,000 reduction based on the history of the improvements and whatnot. I mean, I don't foresee that this would be something that the homeowner is even going to do. So I'm not sure that it's a remedy to the situation, but, okay, Mr. Lawson, you had a comment?
Yeah, I was just going to ask Greg, but Greg, he admitted in his own documentation he can sell his house for the assessed value.
The previous assessed value.
That was 560.
Yeah.
I agree with that statement.
I do too. I from the beginning looked at this and thought this, I don't understand the massive increase on the improvement for what's not livable space yet.
Mm-hmm.
Well, part of it on behalf of the department is, of course, they've upgraded the from average to average plus or something. Yeah, so that helps a little to bump it up, but I mean, that's what, the assessor said, but I still don't see, a 98% increase because of that. And I do, and then probably I do see it if and when he ever finishes the project. But he doesn't have to, and he isn't, and the department knows that it's not livable. So I was thinking about what would I reduce it by, and I like Greg's analysis. Well, I mean, here's the obvious flaw with the house. Somebody has to immediately spend something like $25,000. And so that's a defensible metric. At the same time, of course, the appellant says, well, it's a tear down. If it's tear down, then he ought to argue for zero value, which he did not do.
Right.
So I'm back at Greg's analysis.
Again, going back to the first comments, I think the asbestos issue, I don't think it's something that, it's a particular property that we see this and, it's a big deal to deal with. So many properties in Arlington have that, and it's a matter of maintaining, or if you decide to replace it, then you have to go through the cost of it. But try to find a way to get relief based on that. I think to begin with, the improvement value in past years, I think, was maybe low. But again, without really looking at the whole property, I don't think it's right to try to find a way to make an adjustment based on what we feel. I'm not really in favor of making any changes based on just deciding that can be repaired as opposed to having to replace it, You're missing a few pieces, yeah, you repair it, and there are ways to do it and keep it, if you decide to replace it, then it's another thing that you have to deal with or go through the expense. But I'm not in favor of doing that.
Yeah, I tend to agree with Jose. I mean, I'm struggling with, just a reduction of 25,000 at 17% of the building assessment. And it may be the only house in this neighborhood that has this asbestos, but there surely are other properties in, across the county that have this type of siding. And so, from a standpoint of equalization, we don't go and give a $25,000 credit to them because they haven't upgraded it. I just couldn't support that. And again, I think for the lack of interior photos, I mean, the county's assumed to be correct from a standpoint of they're using a methodical system to come up with what the value would be, and then they're not giving any credit to the upstairs. So without any further documentation of that, I would struggle just to adjust the outside to feel good. But
going
Mary, and I feel there are the buildings that have asbestos siding in Arlington. There's plenty of them that are in good shape that somebody would buy and move into and not feel uncomfortable doing that. There's buyers that'll move into a building with asbestos in it. Just the condition of this, I'm looking at the picture that's like, 10% of one side of the entire building. It's like all gone. To try to get a contractor to come and patch that, there's no way. You're going to have to reside that. So that's my concern, is that you couldn't occupy this building with nobody's going to buy and move into this building the way it is. So you're going to have to do something to that siding. That would be the difference I'd see between this and some of the other buildings that have asbestos siding in it.
And I agree with you. I am confused. I'm looking at the grid and the quality condition. It says average plus to average. And because to me, I think the property is in pretty poor condition.
Yeah.
Whether it's deferred maintenance or just, whatever the reason. I don't know what an adjustment would be to change, the grading of it. I don't know. I'm not comfortable with the $25,000 reduction.
I'm not really comfortable with. I'm just looking at the improvement value going from 71,000 to 147,000, but we're not doing anything for the space upstairs. That's a big increase.
Yeah, I agree.
It's huge. I just don't see that's a reasonable adjustment.
Having said that, of course, I go back to Mary's initial comment that the county's pursuing, the department's assumed correct unless the appellant can make a case against. The appellant didn't make any case that we who think asbestos is a negative factor has made. Just said, oh, the comps in the neighborhood sell for less and mine should be valued at less. And it pains me to say it, but the appellant didn't make his or their own case. We're making it for the appellant. Now, so my question is for feedback, is that appropriate for the board?
No, Ken, it is in the appellant's remarks on page 46 or 47, depending on how you look at it. On the page, it says page 46. But it does say the siding has been ripped off the side. Asbestos siding needs a specialist to remove it, which is quite costly. It's been ripped off the side for years. The condition of entire floor of the house doesn't include drywall or finished floors.
Yeah, so
I mean, reading between the lines, I can sympathize. I can see what happened. They started a renovation. They're getting into some costly conditions that they probably weren't ready for, and they're dealing with that reality. And you're not going to finish out the top floor until your siding is done. You're not going to get your siding done until you can afford to get the asbestos removed legally. So I can definitely sympathize with that.
Thank you.
Right, and Ken, I would agree with you, but our job is on the board to look at the information and see whether it's equalized with other properties. I find this hard to believe that when I look at these comps, and I wish I would have asked the question, but we're past that how it can be average plus, looking at the other three comps. Like, I just think the quality of the home, of the pictures that I saw, let alone the fact that other pictures weren't provided, but just the ones that I did see, I don't see it being average plus. So, I mean, I could see making a reduction for the quality and condition of the space, whether it's usable or not. I mean, overall, I don't know how you get to that. I mean, do you reduce it by 10%? I don't know. I mean, 25,000 seems like a large number to me, but
I think it's too small. I think the value of the improvement is pretty much what it was last year, or somewhat better.
Okay.
I'm not sure why it would be better. Nothing happened from last year.
Exactly.
And the neighborhood is done better.
The studs are a little bit wetter.
That's right. It's a little bit warped.
The mold and mildew.
I mean, do we have any idea what the next step down from very good minus or from, sorry, to average or whatever, taking a jump down overall does to the improvement value?
We don't. We could, if we're all in agreement, we could ask the appraiser. Is everybody in agreement to ask that?
Sure.
Okay. Mr. King, can you give us an idea that if it would drop, because it's showing as, let's just make sure I have this correct here. It's showing on the grid to be average plus. So what would be the next step down?
Would be average what it was last year.
And what difference does that impact?
Yeah, what is the financial?
It takes the improvement down to 134,200.
So that's a roughly $13,000 reduction.
I mean, because I don't believe, thank you, Mr. King. I don't believe the property has gotten any better. It might be bigger because of what they're trying to do, but the bigger isn't usable, which is supposedly discounted in this. I mean, I could certainly be comfortable with that. I don't know how the rest of the group is. I mean, if you want to go higher, I just would like to hear the conversation of how to get to it, but.
So I would be okay going with that change with the quality. I think it's reasonable.
Right, is there argument for higher? I feel like.
No, I
Mr.
think.
Gates?
That's less than your asbestos adjustment.
I know, but it's probably more of a
valid.
Yeah. We're gonna get more of a consensus on this board here too, so I could get along with it. It's basically I think like around a $13,000 reduction.
Yeah.
Right, but that being said, I mean, I've lost Ken for some reason. Put him back up here.
I would have an easier time arguing for more if the appellant were on the call right now.
I agree with that.
And it's like I'm going to make somebody's case only to a certain extent that they've started to make that case if they're not here. So I could go with that. Take another week if they come in and they really want to argue further next year.
Yeah, and send some pictures or, allow the inspection or something. Okay. All right, do you want to make a motion to that?
Yeah, I'll motion to reduce the improvements value to $134,200 based on the average condition, and that takes the total assessment. It will reduce the department's assessment. I might get the math wrong here, so somebody check me.
$669,800.
Right.
Yeah, 669,800.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
A second.
Okay, motion and second by Mary Hogan. All in favor? Aye.
Right.
Ken? Mr. Matzkin, I can't see you.
It looks like he left the conversation. So I think
I sent him a message, but he didn't respond. He's on the phone now.
Okay, and then we have a quorum, and where is also Mr. Lawson? I don't see him.
he also jumped off.
Okay, all right, well, they're not there, so we're going to say that there was no Mr. Lawson or Mr. Matzkin present, but it's a 4-0 confirmation of the reduction to 669,800 by reducing the improvements, the building improvements to 134,200. Okay?
Okay.
All right, so that is a reduction. Okay. Is there any other business from any of the board members we need to talk about? No?
The only thing that I wanted to point out, if you don't mind, is when we are in comments, I think we should make the comments to us, to the board, and not go back to the appellant, because I think it gives them the option to start speaking again. And that's what we've had for yesterday and today. So if we are deliberating and making the comments, let's try to keep it to ourselves.
Right, because it does, it kind of suggests a conversation back or a response back from the appellant. I agree with you from that standpoint. In addition, I think that if there's a way that we can actually physically mute the appellant from speaking during the last part of it, I think that that probably is something that we can talk to the IT folks about. Okay, so, all right, well, that being said, if there's nothing else, I believe that we will stand adjourned until Tuesday, the 23rd, 2020.
Okay, we'll see you.
All right, thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.